Open the podcast bay door as hell.
Everyone, and welcome to episode 103 of Welcome to Geektown. I'm your host, Kurt Onstead. I've been a proud geek all my life, being into role-playing games, board games, sci-fi, fantasy, and especially superheroes and comics. And I want to help others join me in those pursuits, but I've found that sometimes people can get overwhelmed or feel left out because they don't already have what some consider the requisite knowledge to be considered a fan. And that's where Welcome to Geektown comes in. Here, you can ask your questions without feeling like a gatekeeper is calling you out for not yet being fully versed in every aspect of your new interest. This week, we're covering a question from Jesse C., who wants to know about some of the slightly more obscure Batman villains. Specifically, those who were never covered by the films or the 90s animated series. He wrote, quote, "Recently, I've been playing the Batman Arkham series games. While you're playing, you get to see character bio info, and I was pretty surprised. I watched the Batman animated cartoon growing up, and many of the bad guys in the cartoon showed up in the game, along with so many I've never heard of." Then he named Prometheus, Black Mask, Calendar Man, Maxie Zeus, the Ratcatcher, Zaz, Hush, Humpty Dumpty, Tweedledee, and Tweedledum. Jesse continues, "My questions are, what is canon? Do these characters only appear in the game, or in the comics as well? What came first? Why do the Joker and Harley get so much attention, and these characters so little?" Well, Jesse, thanks for writing in. First off, as for your question, what is canon? The video games have their own canon, completely separate from the comics, although much is borrowed from them. If you want to learn more of the history of the universe portrayed in the games, there are some comics out there specifically in that continuity. Now, getting deeper into your question, let me cover the last part first. I think there's a bit of a positive feedback loop when it comes to which characters get the most attention. If a villain originally grabs the reader's attention, they'll insist on that person's return, and he or she will show up more often. If they appear more often, they become the character that even non-readers will associate with the hero, and so they become the go-to character for non-comic media, like movies, TV, and games. And if they show up in those mediums, then they'll be used more often in the comics to tie into their universal popularity in order to try to get new readers. And once that cycle starts, it's hard to stop. Thus, the same few characters get brought back again and again, like Lex Luthor and Zod for Superman, and Joker and Two-Face for Batman. On the Marvel side, Green Goblin and Spider-Man is a good comparison. In many cases, these are some of the earliest villains seen in the comics, but that's not always true, as Harley Quinn shows, having only been around for the last 30 years or so of Batman's nearly 85 years of existence. Movies especially will often use villains who are already well known, as studios are fairly risk-averse, and so want to present familiar characters to the public to help guarantee a good opening weekend. Although one could argue the MCU has been going more and more out on various limbs in their choice of foes. As for what originally garners interest from the audience, that's a good question, and one creators have been struggling with since the beginning of storytelling, I imagine. You mentioned Harley Quinn, who first appeared on the Batman animated series before making the transition to comics, then to live action in TV and film. She was originally just one of Joker's many unnamed henchmen, but something in the combination of her visual and Arlene Sorkin's performance made her a breakout star, leading to her getting added to the stable of DC Comics characters. Although it's rare for that to happen, it's not unheard of, as Jimmy Olsen, Detective Renee Montoya, and Agent Phil Coulson are just a few others who were seen or heard in other media before being added to comic book continuity. Now, as for the games, I haven't played them myself, but I can tell you that every single character you listed is one that has shown up in the comics before being brought over to the video game series. With over 80 years of publishing history, Batman has a ton of villains to choose from, ranging from the terrifying to the ridiculous. And some characters who have been portrayed as both extremes over the years, and everywhere in between. And what tone the creators are working for will help them narrow down that massive list to the ones that fit best into their vision. Looking at that list you provided, I'd actually put these into two different camps. The genuine threats and the jokes. Prometheus, Black Mask, Zsasz, and Hush fall into the first category, with Maxie Zeus, Humpty Dumpty, and Tweedledee and Dum joining the latter. Calendar Man was originally a more jokey villain, but since his reimagining in Batman The Long Halloween by Jeff Loeb and Tim Sale, he's been presented as a more serious threat. Similarly, the Ratcatcher could fall on either side, depending on his characterization. Coincidentally, both Calendar Man and Ratcatcher appeared briefly in The Suicide Squad, in cameos by Sean Gunn and Taika Waititi, respectively. And Ratcatcher's daughter, Ratcatcher 2, was one of the lead characters. Again, not being much of a video game player, I don't know if this is true, but I'm guessing that those that I put into the serious threat category were presented that way in the game, and were probably boss fights or involved in extended arcs in the story, whereas the ones I suggested belonged in the joke category were not as prominent. I'd love to hear how well my theory lines up with reality, so Jesse, or any other Arkham game player, drop me an email and let me know. As for why you didn't see any of these various characters in the animated series that you're more familiar with, well, there's a couple of different answers. First off, in a couple of cases, you did, unless you missed those episodes. Maxie Zeus showed up in one episode, titled Fire from Olympus, while Tweedledee and Tweedledum were occasionally seen as henchmen of the Mad Hatter. Then there's a question of tone, as well as TV standards and practices. Zsasz is a serial killer who scars himself with a hash mark every time he kills someone, and judging from the scars covering his body, has done so dozens, if not hundreds of times. Batman the Animated Series very rarely got away with characters dying on screen, so any portrayal of a character like Zsasz was going to get watered down tremendously. And I'm guessing that Paul Dini, Bruce Timm, and the rest decided to leave him alone for those reasons. Black Mask also probably didn't fit their idea of where they wanted to go with the show, as he is a character with mob ties, but also has fanciful aspects to his origin. In the animated show, organized crime was portrayed fairly straight, and costume characters were kept pretty separate from storylines involving the mob. The other reason some of these characters didn't show up in the DC animated universe is that quite a few of them were created fairly recently. Of the ones I haven't mentioned already as not being appropriate, Calendar Man and Ratcatcher are the only ones who were around before Batman the Animated Series debuted in September of 1992. And at that point, Calendar Man hadn't yet been given his makeover by Loeb and Sale. Prometheus was created by Grant Morrison and Arnie Jorgensen, first appearing in a one-shot titled New Year's Evil in 1998. Hush made his debut in the popular 2003 storyline of the same name, written by Jeff Loeb and drawn by superstar artist, and now DC Chief Creative Officer, Jim Lee. Humpty Dumpty was also created in 2003 by writer Dan Slott and artist Ryan Sook. So, as you can see, the answer to what came first is the comics for almost every single character you mentioned. There's only one costume character that I'm aware of that was created for the game originally, and even that has a caveat. Arkham Knight was introduced as a mystery character in the game, wearing a costume that seemed to be a mixture of the Batsuit and that of a traditional armored knight. Quick spoiler alert for those who haven't finished the Batman Arkham Knight game, but it was revealed that this character was the second Robin, Jason Todd. If you want to hear his comic book history as well as other Robins, check out episode 58. In the video game continuity, he eventually took on the Red Hood costume that he is best known for today in the main publishing line. Coincidentally, another character mentioned earlier, Hush, was also believed to be Jason Todd for a brief amount of time before he was revealed to be Bruce Wayne's childhood friend, Tommy Elliot. Getting back to Arkham Knight, a different character with the same name was introduced to the comics in the anniversary issue Detective Comics number 1000, which came out 4 years after the 2015 video game. This Arkham Knight has direct ties to Arkham Asylum, as the person under the armor is Astrid Arkham, a descendant of the founder of the asylum, driven insane by the death of her mother at the hands of one of the prisoners during a riot. The murder weapon was a batarang, leading Astrid to falsely believe Batman responsible, and she created the costume identity in order to get revenge on the Caped Crusader. She hasn't shown up again in the following 2 years since her debut, but as with all comic book characters, it's probably only a matter of time before another writer chooses to continue her story. And who knows, maybe that'll spark a new interest, leading to her being one of the more popular villains that becomes strongly associated with the general public. Thanks again for your email, Jesse. I didn't go into too much detail about any of the individual characters you mentioned, but I think I still answered the questions you asked. However, if you want me to dive in any deeper on any of these villains, or any other characters you've come across that you want to know more about, just let me know. And that applies to everyone listening. If there's anything comic or otherwise geek culture related that you'd like to hear me cover, please send any and all of those via email to welcome2geektown, all spelled out, @gmail.com. Or you can go to the website, welcome to, the number 2 in this case, geektown.com, and click the Submit a Question link if you'd prefer to remain anonymous. Other contact options include facebook.com/welcome to Geektown or Twitter @GeektownPodcast. Also, if you'd like to support the show directly, come join the Patreon at patreon.com/welcome to Geektown for just $1 per month to get access to full scripts of the shows, outtakes, and a monthly shoutout. You can also help the show grow by subscribing and giving a 5-star review over on Apple Podcasts to join the Geektown City Council, which helps other people find the show so we can all tell them, welcome to Geektown, population, us. Welcome to Geektown is written, narrated, edited, and produced by me, Kurt Onstead. Theme music is by Aaron Levitz, logo art by Archie Santana. All other sound clips are the copyrighted material of their respective owners, and no infringement is intended, falling under fair use.